Musical Talk at the Edinburgh Festival Fringe 2015. Hello and welcome to another edition of Musical Talk. I'm Thos Ribbits, and as Stephen Sondheim once very wisely said in one of his lyrics, you've got to have a gimmick. So for today's episode, I'm recording these links dressed in scuba diving gear. And if that's not good radio, I don't know what is, as you've probably worked out. Well, today we have a star-studded episode because we're going to be looking at 5 shows, and each of the 5 shows was awarded 5 stars by me, and indeed by many other people, at this year's Edinburgh Festival Fringe. But what's really remarkable about all the productions you're going to be hearing about today is that they are all Speechmark's one-person shows. Now, there's no such thing as a real one-person show, or at least very rarely, because even with the smallest cast or team of creatives, there's going to be someone on the day turning on the lights, and during the production process there may have been someone who suggested an idea that you've used. So everything, of course, is collaborative, and there's nothing more collaborative than theatre, and musical theatre in particular. However, that doesn't mean that you don't have what would be recognised as one-person shows. And that means, for the most part, you're only seeing one person on the stage who's carrying the show. And today we're going to be talking to 3 such people about 5 very different shows, all of which were absolutely tip-top. They are Cine Musicals, more accurately entitled Lawrence Owen Cine Musicals. It's a one-man show. Another called Cautionary Tales for Daughters, Songs Your Mother Never Taught You, by Tanya Holt. And finally, an old friend of this programme, John Hinton, who was performing 3 separate shows as part of a trilogy of scientific musicals. A science-trilogy, if you will. His term, I should say. Entitled The Element in the Room, a radioactive musical comedy about the death and life of Marie Curie. Albert Einstein, Relatively Speaking. And a show we've discussed before here on Musical Talk, with the snappy title The Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, or The Survival of Re-Evolutionary Theories in the Face of Scientific and Ecclesiastical Objections, being a musical comedy about Charles Darwin, 1809 to 1882, where essentially John has taken 3 titans of the world of science and illustrated not only their lives, but also their ideas in a tremendously wonderful musical theatre comedy way. More of which later. So that's 5 5-star shows, all ostensibly being one-person shows, although as you will hear, occasionally another person will turn up on stage, or there is an accompanist, and those people should not be forgotten, of course. But the drivers behind these shows are solitary individuals, and today we're going to be hearing from 3 of them. So, let's start now. In a minute you'll hear an interview with Lawrence Owen, who's a tremendously intelligent and thoughtful composer of film incidental music, who's also turned his hand to stand-up comedy and spoofing musical theatre and indeed musical film styles. And that's what his show Lawrence Owen Cine Musicals is all about. So let's hear the introductory song from that show, which gives you a very strong flavour of the show itself, and then afterwards a chat with Lawrence Owen himself. Cue opening music.
Musical, an adventure in music alone. Sounds acoustical, we'll be guiding our way as we venture into the unknown. Cine musical, though the venue's for over 18s. This is suitable for the family as well, so let's call it a PG-13. Just my pre-recorded soundtrack and a microphone. And cause I can't afford to pay more actors, I'm doing it all on my own. Cine musical, it's like watching a film with your ears. Not so beautiful, but I hope nonetheless we can picture amazing frontiers. thoughtful bits disguised as trivial shit. And at the heart of it, a part of it sincere. Our love of cinema, big thrills and movie stars, and swooning orchestras are all because real life is pretty lame. So escape with me today. Sound is a powerful guide for the things that we feel inside. With just some orchestration and your imagination, you'll make the pictures in your mind. Cinemusical, listen well to the tidings I bring. Things unusual will be drifting your way in a storm cloud of trumpets and strings. Cinemusical is a really hard word to make rhyme. Roman numerals are a really hard way to remember the date and the time. Now the credit sequence ends and the adventure starts. There'll be grunting and panting and substandard acting and maybe a minor award for original score.
Musical talk.
My name is Lawrence Owen, and my show is called Lawrence Owen's Cinemusical, and I wrote and perform the show. That's about as succinct as I can put it, really, I think.
You put your finger right on the button there, if I may say. But the show itself is actually a fantastic show. It's musical, it's funny, it's beautifully acted. Bearing in mind it's a one-man show, that's a bit of a compliment to you, I think.
Thank you.
Indeed, all of that is beautifully focused together to make a truly satisfying hour.
Oh, that's very nice to hear.
But I think it would be worthwhile just briefly explaining the conceit of your show for people who are foolish enough not yet to have seen it.
Well, my show is it's a musical comedy hour, but it's essentially an adventure story, like an adventure film in the kind of sort of 1980s Indiana Jones sort of mould of classic adventure films, but all told using an original score. And nothing else, and it sort of goes. It sort of lurches between different film genres. So it starts off with some Disney, and then it goes into westerns and James Bond films, and there's a sci-fi and etc. etc. etc.
There's lots of references if you want to find them, aren't there?
Yeah, I mean the joy of it, I think, is sort of crashing between all of these different film worlds. And so that was what was fun to write about it, and to perform and hopefully to watch, is this sort of the weirdness of having all of these things sort of clash and come together, and the weird dynamics between characters that really shouldn't ever meeting, like a Disney princess and a Bond villain and things like that.
There's also a very strong sense of the Wizard of Oz, in fact, as well.
Yes.
Which is, in a way, the first road movie, isn't it? Really?
It is. I describe it at the start of the show as being like a quest film, but in a way it is sort of like a road movie. And yes, it is. The plot is basically the Wizard of Oz. You've got four main characters who want some sort of change in life, going on a quest to find somebody who might be able to help them. Essentially, is the plot format. But all of their problems arise from the limitations of their own genres. Yeah. So, without giving too much away, the Disney character feels there's really only three paths that women can take in the Disney world. The cowboy character is sort of not content to be just a lone wandering gunman. He wants to have an active social life, etc., etc. So the genres themselves dictate the problems of the characters, which was that was a fun thing to try and find the tropes and the cliches of each of these things to try and find what might be wrong with each of these people.
Yes, it's all stereotypes, isn't it?
Yeah,
and truisms as well.
Yeah.
And therefore immediately accessible, because obviously we've all seen enough films, even if we're not great film fans. Everyone will have seen enough of the kind of films you're taking a stick to, shall we say, a pointed stick, to know what we're getting in a way, and
hopefully recognise the tropes,
the shorthand of the characters. Now, let's talk about the construction of the piece, because and this I think is one of the things that makes this really stand out as a remarkable piece, actually, in many ways. Because, forgive me, in real life, one of your many talents is that you actually are a film score composer.
Yes.
But you also, this is a musical and on stage. Now, you have found a rather splendid way of fusing the idea of the music, once again, which can fall into stereotype, or at least there's a certain feel and tone to a certain kind of genre, which you're very good at creating and replicating, and in a way you've managed to make a pastiche score of films, which rings absolutely true, whilst at the same time being absolutely original.
Thank you.
But you've also managed to turn it into a musical, so it is that fusion of what might be called incidental music from a film, then becoming a song, sometimes because you've set lyrics to it which fit and are nice and witty and clever, and fit the character. And then sometimes a song appears specifically, although it is often the kind of song you would expect to see in that kind of film, without giving too much away. The wise character at the end sings a song that the moment we in the audience heard the banjo accompaniment, we knew we were at least getting some kind of Muppety overtone. I won't put it any further than that.
I'm glad you picked up on that. I can sense that in the room there's normally about 10% of the crowd that kind of go, "Oh, I see."
Yes.
Yeah, which is always nice.
Land.
And I always sort of think, "Yeah, you're my people. You're the ones." But
it is that balance and the fusion between film music and show music.
Right.
I know that's a very blunt instrument I'm using there, but how difficult or easy was that for you to dance over that clef?
Well, I started off by really thinking what kind of films, what genres of films have songs in them already. So that was my starting point. So I thought, okay, Disney is full of songs. They're all essentially musicals. James Bond films, they have very iconic theme tunes. Westerns often have a weird almost like a Greek chorus of song narration. Like all of the old John Wayne films often have what's the guy's name? I can't remember the guy's name, but there's a particular singer who would always do this thing, and it was basically along the lines of, "And now he's riding to Boot Hill to face the guy who's gonna," and so I found films which already had songs in them, which made it easier to sort of fit a song into that context, and then sort of bled bits of sound of incidental music out either side of these things. And it started really as a result of the Disney one that opens the show is actually slightly older than the rest of the show. I wrote that last year, and it just made it into last year's Fringe show.
Oh, really?
Yes, in fact, which was a more straightforward musical comedy hour, just me doing songs with a guitar. But every time that I found that the bit that I was enjoying most in the show was this one number that I had done with a full score. And so I thought, okay, next year I want to do something like that, because it seemed to be that people were saying that, the thing that felt like the strongest aspect of what I was doing was the pastiching. So I thought, well, why don't I make a whole show of pastiches? So that's kind of how this show came about. It was actually quite a late decision, weirdly, to turn it into a story in and of itself. I wrote a couple of these numbers from the show not long at all after last year's Edinburgh Fringe.
So in a kind of review format originally?
It was a kind of maybe like a sort of just lurching from... like a review, essentially. And then I
love the word lurch, by the way.
Yeah.
You were much defter than that.
It feels like lurching in my mind. So I wrote a couple of these without really knowing how they were going to fit together in about September in 2014, and then I did nothing for about 8 months.
I believe that's known as the creative impulse.
That's how you write a Fringe show. You have an idea in September, you think, I've nailed it, I won't think about it again for the next 8 months, and then you write the entire thing in an awful panic long after you've submitted your blurb to the Fringe programme. But that's kind of what I did. I sort of wrote the rest of it in between May and July.
It doesn't have that sense at all. I mean, it feels like it does not feel as though it's from its mother's womb untidily ripped. It feels like a fully formed Bonnie bouncing baby.
Well, that's very nice to hear. That's good. That's a relief. But yeah, so that was how the idea came about, and I haven't really looked back. It's a lot more fun than just playing the guitar. I've got to say, it's nice to be able to move around as much as anything. Because when you're just with a guitar, you're rooted to the spot.
Well, let's talk about your performance then, if you don't mind me saying, because actually, for a man whose Speech Mark's real career is writing music for films and things like that, being a composer, my word, you have the ability to hold an audience actually for an hour, because it's it is a full hour, or near as damn it, in Edinburgh conditions.
Yeah. BBC hour.
Yes, it's quite an hour for the weather. But also, you play these 4 splendid delineated characters and their interactions, and that's quite difficult. I appreciate the gender and the stereotypes help delineate that, but actually that's a big ask of an individual performer.
Yeah.
So when did you first discover, because you've been up to the Fringe before, when did you first discover that you had these skills?
Well,
and how easy are they to sustain over an hour?
Well, I've been an actor since I was a kid. When I was very young, I actually did a bit of child acting, sort of professionally, if you can call it that. Yeah, I was in various films. I did a BBC TV series when I was about 8. I was in lots of plays. I did some adverts and stuff.
That was a fairly large portfolio, really.
Yeah, that was between about 7 and 12. I did a fair amount of professional child acting. And then stopped doing that because my voice broke, and my agent at the time said, basically, you're not cute enough anymore, which is harsh, but I take her point.
My agent at the time. Yes. Well, the story is already written before me.
There it is. Well, I mean, to be a child actor, really, and to get loads of work, you need to look younger than you actually are.
And the cuteness factor is a point.
Yeah, it really is. So, I mean, if they're looking for a 12-year-old, if they can find a 14-year-old who looks 12, they'll cast that person because of the supposed maturity of that person. But I had the opposite. I was 12, but I looked 14, so I was no good to anyone. So that was the end of that. But about that time, I started playing guitar, and that sort of led me to discover music, and I was in lots of bands and things growing up. For a brief while I was a session musician.
Oh right,
and then
so you've never left the performing arts?
No, not really. I mean, I did a sort of slightly Mickey Mouse music tech course at university, which taught me the basics, and then from there.
Sorry, you mean Mickey Mouse in the sense of slightly shonky, rather than actually a Disney course?
Well,
that would have helped you marvellously.
That would be extremely impressive, but no, it was definitely not that. And meanwhile, coming up to the Edinburgh Fringe a lot, as a punter for many years, and I know this is now my 3rd year performing at the Fringe. In one of the years that I came up here, I met in the very early years of their development a company called 1927, who now have come on to be a big success on the back of one Fringe show, and they've done the national and tours of the, and they were at the West End and all sorts of things. And I've now started acting as their sound designer.
Oh, how wonderful!
Which is very nice. And I've done some composing work for Paul Barrett, who is the animator for that company. And they have an extraordinary style where they have a huge screen on stage and they project animations, and the actors sort of interact with the animation. So all of the set and the worlds and stuff, and actually quite a few of the characters aren't really there. But it means that the possibilities for that company are pretty much endless. It's
funny. The Menier did Sunday in the Park with George, possibly about 5 years ago now, and that was really the first time that kind of projection and interaction with actors. A chap comes on as a waiter. And there's a bottle on the screen which pours wine, and there's a yapping dog. But that was the first time I'd seen that kind of thing.
That sounds very similar.
Yeah, that's the future, I think. In some sense,
I think so. Yeah, they've done so well that they've actually got a show here at the Edinburgh International Festival this year.
The Speech Mark's proper
festival. The proper festival, exactly. Yeah. And then sort of after university and from that and collaborating with them, I've made various scores for theatre and short film and things. We had a film that went to Sundance Film Festival, which was very nice, and that sort of thing. So I've kind of been chipping away at being a composer for the last sort of 4 years, but also doing comedy gigs, which I got into kind of by accident because I'd started writing sort of humorous narrative songs which I was performing at straight music nights, and it was going down every time like a fucking brick budgie. It was like they were not interested at all. They wanted Ed Sheeran, and I was not able to deliver Ed Sheeran. And so I was getting a bit depressed. I was thinking, maybe no one wants these songs at all. Until someone said, well, why don't you go and try it at a comedy night? And I hadn't thought of that prior to that, and this was about 2011. And since then, I've been doing it in comedy clubs and this sort of thing ever since, really. And I haven't.
And with
looked
some
back.
Success, I think.
Well, it's been going very well. Yeah. It's been certainly a lot more fun and a lot more successful.
Also, perhaps slightly less pretentious, which is
which,
nicer for the soul.
Yeah. I have to say, the friendliness of people. I'm hesitant to use the word bitchiness because it's a word that seems to get thrown around a lot, particularly with musical theatre, weirdly. And in my experience and other people's experience, my flatmate Suze Kempner, she's a comedian and musical theatre performer, and she says exactly the same thing, which is that people always think musical theatre is full of bitchiness and a lot of catty behaviour. And actually,
Bette Davis kind of.
Yeah, but it's not. They tend to be very nice. And then comedians are slightly more so, but still not enormously. But the musicians, the singer-songwriters, they're the worst. They're the worst.
There's
people.
a horrible po-facedness in some aspects of the music industry
so
these days.
Dry and humourless and so utterly convinced of its own greatness. I couldn't wait to get out of it, I have to say.
Well, forgive me, that's if you don't mind me saying, that's the world of musical theatre and comedy's benefits, if I may say.
That's very kind.
And that really does explain how you were able to sustain these characters. But then, let's talk about the writing process, because at one level you can say, yes, it's easy to sit down, and we've all seen enough Disney films from childhood, let's face it, to see what some of the tropes are. And as you say, that limitation that some of the characters, principally females, have. People actually talk about the Disney princess, don't they? My daughter's a bit of a Disney princess.
They do.
It's become such a trope. I in no way criticise the Disney company, because goodness sake, they're the only company that's been making musicals consistently since the 1930s.
They are the calibre of what they
Yeah.
do is extraordinary, and as much as I like to
Poke a bit of
take
fun.
the mick. I'm a huge admirer.
There's a lot of Mickey in Disney
there's
to
a
take.
lot, there's a lot of that. There's a
take
lot
us
of
back
that.
there again.
Yep.
But actually, some of the questions are a little bit more oblique. Well, I'm not going to explain how what the outcome is, but we have a character from the Bond films, and you who's on the villains end of the market rather than the heroes end of the market. And it's about him discovering his backstory or explaining his backstory, or I think you actually asked the question. No one ever asked what the backstory of a Bond henchman would be. And actually, but there's a reason for that, because I go to see James Bond films. I very much like them, but I never think about the psychological.
But you don't, do you?
No, you don't. You simply don't, and you're not encouraged to, of course.
No.
So, how did that question land in your brain? When you were picking your tropes, I suppose, is the question which is looming slowly out of this murk. But how did you pick your characters, and how did you know the right question to ask in each case?
I think to some extent I thought, what would be a fun collection of physicalities and people,
if you actually saw it,
to put together into one story. And in fact, I mean, I'm kind of playing everyone, and I am playing everyone, and it's this sort of physical theatre thing, I suppose, in a way. But what we have
not bad for a man in a tie.
Yeah, we have a young-ish female character. We have a sort of ageless in the Disney princess. We have a sort of ageless male character in the Western gunslinger. We have an I'm going to come out and say that we have a character in the Bond henchman. We have a character unsure of his gender identity. That's the topic covered there,
which is already very much in contrast with what Bond offers.
Exactly, yeah. That kind of felt like an interesting angle, because it's such a masculine genre to put that in there as well. And then we have an animal. We have a tiny little bird, his thing is that he's not happy with being perpetually cast as the sidekick. And so what I ended up with, almost kind of by accident, but once I found that it was going that way, I thought, great, let's keep it moving in that way, is we've actually got quite a right-on bit of political correctness here, because we've got a feminist issue in The Disney Princess, we've got a masculinist, if that's a correct word, masculist issue in the cowboy.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes.
In a way. Because his thing is that the rules of the Western genre require him to be a very masculine character, and not able to ever express any emotion or make any human connection, really.
Well, funny enough, I sort of see him as forced into being a sociopath, when in fact actually he isn't.
He isn't. He's the complete opposite of that. Yeah. We have a gender politics issue in the transgender or transitioning James Bond henchman, and then we have a race issue essentially in the little bird who, because of the circumstances of his birth, being born a bird, he is now not entitled to play a lead role, apart from in a very specific kind of film.
The reference here is, isn't it? Colourblind casting is becoming more and more common, and quite rightly so.
Yeah.
We haven't yet had any species-blind casting.
Yeah. I mean, there's a joke in it where he says it's very hard to get cast in a lead role as an avian American.
Yeah.
I thought of that line first, and then worked backwards from there. I probably shouldn't reveal too much of the mechanics of how it works,
but the characters themselves are entertaining, and as we said, delineated. And but were there any characters that you were toying with, or any genre that you were toying with, that have bit the dust?
Yeah, there was going to be a sort of Lara Croft type character who was going to be illustrated using John Williams music, essentially.
Oh right, okay, yes.
She was going to be a kind of lady adventurer in the sort of kind of very upper class English.
Yes. Diana Croft.
Yeah, Diana Croft, like whip cracking and
really,
and it was all going to be very Indiana Jonesy, but she sort of morphed into the Western character because it just sort of, she was a bit too close to the evil queen character.
Yes, I mean,
it would have been hard to delineate.
Kick-ass character.
Yeah, it would have. It just would have been quite hard to delineate between those two, I think. So she didn't make it in, and there was, what else was there? I think there was going to be. I think there might at one point have been an alien.
Oh right, okay.
Like a sort of B-movie alien.
So a robot or a sort of wiggly arm?
I think a kind of like a Roswell-style alien,
right,
like 1950s kind of paranoia alien. But that sort of didn't really work either. And there's a little bit of 50s sci-fi music which made it in when they're all travelling in between the different lands. But
for want of a better phrase, there's a lovely montage section where I let me just say that I could sit back and watch you enjoying yourself both on the stage and having also enjoyed yourself in the composing elements, because that looked like a labour of love to me.
That was the most fun bit to do by far, because I ended up making about a minute of music from lots of different genres of film that didn't quite make it in, but that have themselves very distinctive kinds of music. So there's some horror, there's a war film, like a kind of Bridge over the River Kwai kind of thing, and there's a bit of silent movie as well, which is always fun.
You actually use intertitles.
I do, yeah. That was one of the many aspects of it that was actually my wife's idea.
Oh really? Jolly good.
She gave me a lot of ideas. She said, "Oh, you could do that," and then I went, "That's a brilliant idea," and then I went and did it. But yeah, that montage bit where they're crashing between universes, that was one of the most fun bits to do.
But I tell you, sorry to interrupt you, but one of the great pleasures of that, if I may say, is also the, first of all, the dexterity and the skill that you've got the ear for all of those kind of things, and actually allowing us, members of the public, most of whom, including me, haven't really thought about, but you can only watch so many Neil Brand documentaries on BBC4, and I love them, and he's exactly the kind of person to talk about this.
He's wonderful.
But the actually hearing the music one after the other is a really instructive process, actually. And quite unfairly, of course, silent movie is often thought of as being sort of massively over the top. It was in its earlier period, but in those last few films of the mid to late 1920s.
Wasn't it? Before 1927.
There's a fantastic film called Shooting Stars, if you've ever seen it.
I haven't seen that one.
But it's as subtle and as clever as any modern film, and it just doesn't need dialogue. That's what's wonderful about it. And you can see the sophistication coming into a genre, which, if it had lasted another 5 years, I think we'd have remembered very differently.
Yeah.
But you have quite rightly gone for the up, and there's that kind of sort of, I'm not going to say honky-tonk, but there is that kind of cinema, upbeat, great silent movie film that we associate, I think, with silent comedies.
Well,
and that sits so, you know, you're listening to the genre, this genre of music, and it's at one level, and you're listening to the next to sci-fi, and it's at another level. And suddenly you've got this kind of over-the-top exuberance of that kind of film, as though they were making up for the silence of those films, or the lack of dialogue in the music, which of course is actually what is happening. But to hear it, that came alive to me. So you've actually given me a bit of film history.
I'm really glad, actually, because that bit, the silent movie bit, was the hardest bit to write of all of those little excerpts. I really laboured over that for a few days, because it had to be obviously just for a piano. Even though that actually is not accurate, really.
Is it not?
No. I mean, it's almost always these things were either performed by small orchestras or with an organ. But people's idea of a silent movie is that it's on this sort of pub piano.
Which is odd, because I suspect that's because all the silent films, particularly when I was a boy, they still showed silent films, comedies mostly.
Right.
Of course, did have the soundtrack attached to them at some stage, presumably when sound came in the 30s and 40s. So it's a retrospective reimagining, which we were taken as gospel,
as being gospel, but no, that's
a really interesting point.
Thank you. And in fact, the limitation of that was quite, and it's not a style I would have ever composed in normally. This sort of unbelievably melodramatic but quite tinny piano music. That I mean, I'm not a pianist as well, so it took me quite a long time to sort of bash
it out.
And I had to sort of re-record lots of little bits. Some of it I cheated and just put the notes in the computer. But,
however, I will tell you that it works absolutely.
Well, I'm very glad.
It immediately, on first chord, you can tell what it is, and it works, and it's funny. So it's got intrinsic worth. That's what's lovely about it.
I'm very glad to hear
your
that.
pastiches have a. I use pastiche, and I don't mean it in the negative sense. I mean it actually very much in the positive sense. They have the truth of what they're being themselves.
Well, I've always sort of felt like my favourite parodies are in themselves good examples of the things that they are parodying. Like, Blazing Saddles, for instance, Mel Brooks film. That is a really good Western. It's really good.
It's funny, I always think the same about Carry On Cowboy, which actually I think gets the atmosphere right somehow.
In
Pinewood.
Yes, exactly. And even though the end of Blazing Saddles goes absolutely insane, and then they're going between film studios in LA, and the whole thing is entirely meta, and all of the realism evaporates. It's still a good Western.
Yes.
Like, they're having them ending off with them riding off into the sunset and then getting in a limo. It's really funny, but it's a good Western.
It's still true to itself.
It is, yeah. So I've always tried with parody to first of all make a good example of the topic in question, and then find the funny after that. So I sort of think
that's a very good way of doing it. Actually,
I've always felt like I'm a composer first, comedian second.
Yeah.
And so I've each time started with. Interestingly, no, that's not true. I've just realised that with writing this show, I would have started with the lyrics, and then fitted but I'd had the idea for the song. I know exactly the kind of thing it would sound like. I could hear it in my head, and so then I would write the lyrics as a poem essentially, and then make the music that I'd thought of earlier.
So you might have done the components in a slightly different order, but the truth is still, your position is still there. But actually, when it actually comes to the mechanics of writing the song, the music has to be truthful first, and then the comedy is the augmentation of that afterwards.
So I'd have
even if you knew what the comedy augmentation would be earlier than the song was written.
Exactly. So I'd start with an idea of the music, then do the lyrics, and then make the music concrete.
Well, let's talk about the lyrics, because the lyrics have to serve a dual function. Actually, they have to work in a song, and a song is, in its basic sense, a story in itself, a sketch almost. But also, it's because it sort of interweaves the music so perfectly with the incidental music. It also has a narrative function as well as the story it's trying to tell. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I know that the problem is musical theatre is such a wide genre that the Sondheim school is that every song must drive the plot forward and you can't take it out. And then you go back to Gershwin where every song is pull-outable.
Yes.
But they're both musical theatre.
Yeah,
they're both fine. But I'm very interested to know how, because what you were required to do is just that slightly different thing, because you're already pulling the sheet music of themes of film scores into musical theatre.
Right.
How did the lyrics fall into that category as well, I suppose? I'm such a long-winded man. You would have, so plenty of thinking time there.
Yeah, that's plenty of thinking time. Well, the main thing is I wrote out, just in prose, the story, what we had to achieve in the hour, who we were going to have achieving this, and how they were going to do it.
Yeah.
I wrote that out lots of times until it kind of had a very concrete plot, which ended up basically just being very similar to The Wizard of Oz. And I thought, that is one of the greatest stories ever told.
And it's a trope.
And it is. It's the ultimate quest thing, really. Characters want a thing from life. They go to find someone or something that can help them find that thing in life. And so then it was just a case of choosing which genres would be the most fun to portray on stage and in music, and then seeing what kind of interactions they would have. I deliberately wanted to make it nice, if that makes sense. I wanted to make it sort of like you really wanted them to get that. I didn't want them to make it like I didn't want them to all to be these sort of, bitter characters that were sort of, perpetually unhappy and have all things sort of tending towards the sort of inevitability of
Well, funnily enough, starting with your Disney character, just interrupting you there, sorry, actually helped set that tone a little bit.
Well, that was it. That was a deliberate. That's why I put her first, is because the mechanics of that song basically kind of say this is what's going to be the recurring theme.
It's not just her story; it's the story.
It's the story as well.
Yes. Which you might have had more trouble with if you'd used the Bond character, just because the expectations are set up in a different way.
Yeah. There was never any doubt that would be the first one.
So, as you say, the interesting thing is that your tone to yourself was likeable characters.
And I wanted people at the end to be really pleased for them, if they kind of... Because without giving too much away, it's not... There isn't... The sort of moral of it is that there is no sort of wizard.
No.
And in the same sort of way.
The Wizard of Oz works.
The Wizard of Oz, yeah, exactly. There is nothing. You have to basically just do it yourself.
Yeah.
It's a kind of slightly
very much like looking for a producer to do a show on a Fringe.
Yeah, exactly. And like, it's not going to be easy. There's no shortcut. But if you chip away at it, it will hopefully, or other, it's no one's saying it will come true, that dream. But you've got a much better chance of it coming true if you try to make it the case. There's a sort of fake Gandhi quote that's in it, where he says, "Be the change you want to see," which isn't actually a real Gandhi quote. It's like elementary, my dear Watson, is never actually said by Sherlock Holmes.
But it will be understood in that context.
But exactly. It's a kind of summation of everything he said, I think. But yeah, that's the sort of the moral of it, I guess, and that was a real thing that I really wanted to inform the whole tone of it, was that it's a nice story.
But the lyrics coming out of that book and that tone, how easy was that, or not? Because there's a lovely lot of craft in this. That's one of the things I love. I've enjoyed the performance, but I can also, you showed your workings, as they used to say in exams, and that's a good thing. That's what you get marked on,
good.
Frankly. So.
Good. Well, I've always found the lyrics to be the hardest aspect of it. I always feel like once I've got the lyrics down, then the music will come naturally, because the lyrics inform the direction of the music. So the lyrics were hard to actually pin down. Having found the concept for each character, actually making the lyrics was a bit tricky. But then beyond that, the music writes itself in a way, because it's I know
only if you're damn talented.
Well, I don't know, but I mean,
but I know what you mean.
Do you know what I mean? Like you know what it has to sound like, because it's a famous style of music. You know what you have to achieve, and it has to be sort of basically, in a way, the easy thing about this is if you feel like it's cliched, that's probably correct, because that's probably what you want to go for. Like, it's the one instance in which I'd kind of go, yes, I'll have all the cliches, yes, make it sound like Fistful of Dollars, yes, make it sound like The Little Mermaid, do whatever, So in a way, that, for me, felt like it came very naturally once the lyrics had been made. So yeah, I always feel like the plot and the words are the sort of big thing to conquer, and then it's okay. Then I'm on the home straight.
Well, it's Sondheim himself who says content dictates form.
Exactly.
So,
yes.
Who's to argue with him?
I would never argue with Sondheim. absolutely not. He's the number one as far as I'm concerned in the musical theatre world, and I'm sure many share that opinion.
It's not a controversial.
It's
position
not a controversial
anymore.
position. No. I think at one point. I think it's not. He still seems to divide people, which is kind of quite nice. But
now it's like or not like rather than good or not good.
Good or not
That's
good.
The
Yes.
difference,
Yes. I really like the mechanics of Sondheim. I really like the design of Sondheim. I've always felt more of a kinship with the concept of design as opposed to the concept of art. I don't know why. I feel like art is this sort of wishy-washy thing inhabited by the slightly pretentious people.
Art isn't easy, I've been told.
No, but that's it. But then design, I sort of feel like it's, isn't it beautiful to have things that function? And that's why I've always sort of liked the concept of design, and that's kind of what I've always tried to bring to mind things.
Well, and you've actually described that very thoroughly yourself by writing the story out. If book is king, then everything else. If your foundations are sound, your castle will be excellent.
Exactly.
Yes,
That's how I've always felt.
So, Lawrence, this show is fantastic. How are the audiences? Well, I know because I was there, but the audiences took to it very warmly. I think because it's so accessible from the start.
Yeah, so far it's been a delightful run. I've had full houses every day, which is always very nice. I've been not. I hate. I'm almost hesitant to say this because it sounds like a brag, and I really don't mean it to be a brag. But I've been surprised by the number of people who have come out in tears.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean,
so seats are quite uncomfortable.
Well, yeah, no, horrible venue.
That's not true at all.
It's not true at all. I've got one of the loveliest rooms on the free Fringe, which is very nice. But yeah, even very cynical, hardened comedians have come out of it. Like a friend of mine he's a very good comedian, and I would not have thought that she would be the sort of person who would come out having this reaction. But she came out in floods and gave me a big hug and said, "That's so nice," which I had not have. I thought it was silly and maybe sweet, but no more than that. But people seem to be really liking it, which is very nice.
Do you know? I wonder once again if that's down to the setting the tone in the Disney mould at the very beginning, because in a way, the moment, and once again, I'm not in any way having a go at Disney, but but there's going to be a heightened level of sentimentality.
There's going to be a lot of sentimentality,
rather than true emotion, and that's a very, once again, a blunt instrument to describe it, but it's a shorthand. That's how it works. And I suppose if you set that tone, it's a lot easier to create sentimentality.
It is.
The pain of real.
Yeah. I mean, the only films I ever cry at are Disney films because they're just so good at it.
Yes.
They're so good at poking at all your little, especially Pixar. Toy Story 3, I can't handle it. I mean, I love it, but I can't handle it. It has me. I'm a mess by the end of it.
Really?
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
But I think that's it. And I suppose that. I think it's because of the kind of music it is. The reason this music is used in films is because it has been proven to be such a shortcut to emotion. Like Steven Spielberg talks about John Williams and saying he's got such a gift for bypassing thought and going straight to the heart. And it really is true. I mean, maybe it's just the films that I grew up watching, like Star Wars and Indiana Jones and things.
We all grew up
of
watching,
course.
frankly, let's be honest.
Of course. But maybe it's just because they are such a huge part of almost everyone's childhood that you do get such a visceral reaction to the music of John Williams. But I think he does have an extraordinary gift for doing that. And when you're pastiching these people, hopefully, if you're doing it well, some of that will come through as well.
I've got to ask you this is just an academic question, but when you're pastiching John Williams, do you ever find yourself in the world of Prokofiev?
Yes.
I thought so.
Very often, because, I mean, so does he.
Yes, yeah. Yes, indeed. He's the modern Prokofiev.
I mean, I think there's some, I think it was Rachmaninoff said this quote, which I don't know how true this is, but he said something like, "Copying is the domain of amateurs, but stealing is the pleasure of the great."
Now, that's a great
Which is an
quotation,
interesting
isn't it?
quote. I mean, I don't know, I'm not sure I quite agree with it, but it's an interesting thing to say.
You could say it across a dinner table at a party and then go, a bit of wise man.
It's very much like, I wouldn't open with it, let's put it that way. I wouldn't do it at the Comedy Store.
No.
Yeah, I thought stealing is the pleasure of the great. But it's an interesting idea, at least. And and so I think that's why it does seem to be speaking to people, is because it's
interesting,
aping
isn't
other
it?
things.
It is essentially taking the heartstrings, putting them on a fingerboard, and then taking a bow to them. Really.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, Lawrence, do you have a website?
Yes, I do have a website. My website, well, I have two, in fact.
Go on.
Well, my sort of comedy and performing website is www.mrlawrenceowen.com.
Is that Mr. Mister?
No, that's just MR and then Lawrence with a U. mrlawrenceowen.com. And then my sort of more functional work composing website, should anyone be interested in that, is just lawrenceowen.co.uk. So those are the two. But if you're interested in my show and me being up in Edinburgh, then mrlawrenceowen.com is the one to go to. And
I recommend it. And is the show likely to go somewhere else afterwards?
I'm certainly going to be doing it in London again after Edinburgh. I'll be doing it in the autumn in London. I haven't booked any dates yet, but I'm planning to very soon. So if you go onto my website, you can sign up to my mailing list on there, and then you'll be bombarded with information about that. And then I'm thinking about trying to tour it after that. And
I think you could.
I feel like it could potentially tour, and the next year, my plan is at the Fringe, I think, to come back with a new show for the full run, but to do this one for maybe a few performances again.
Run it in repertoire.
Yeah. To do maybe a week or 4 or 5 days of this one again.
I think this has got legs. I think if it came back to Edinburgh next year, you'd still be selling out, to be honest. Yeah.
I hope so. That'd be very nice. It's going very nicely so far.
Lawrence, it's a fantastic show. Thank you so much for talking to me about it. It's actually been a delight to hear your insights into your creative process.
I'm really glad.
And good luck for the rest of the run.
Thank you very much.
Musical talk. And that was Lawrence Owen. I very much enjoyed my conversation with him, and he's well worth tracking down to see him perform his shows. Go to his website now and see if you can find out whether he's going to be appearing near you. I very much enjoyed that conversation with Lawrence because he'd thought about what he was doing very well. And we conducted the interview in what must be the most Edinburgh fringy venue possible. It was a pop-up haggis shop, and you just don't see those everywhere. And as I said, I gave Lawrence's show 5 stars and called it an impeccably performed and hilarious musical gem. A very different one-person show, and yet still excellent in its own right, was Cautionary Tales for Daughters, Songs Your Mother Never Taught You, which was written and performed by Tanya Holt. It was a series of songs, sketches, and indeed video presentations, all working together in an integrated way to create a series of tableaux or fables, or as the title says, cautionary tales in the Hilaire Belloc style, aimed specifically at teenage girls perhaps, but inviting in an audience of everyone from society, man, woman, young, old, and they were all there the day I was in attendance. It was another great show. So let's hear, once again, a song from this show, Cautionary Tales for Daughters, and then afterwards, let's listen to the interview I conducted with Tanya Holt.
I wanna be a cowboy riding on the plains, just me and Pepito, my pony, fighting Injuns in wigwams. Me and Pepito be famous, daring dudes would make our name. I'd be a star in the saloon bar, win a fortune in a game. But I can't be no cowboy, Ma says girls can't ride alone. You can make a cowboy joyful, give him a happy home. Bacon, scrumptious apple pie, wear ribbons in your hair. No, Mary, this can't be. Girls should not want that. You should try being a princess, Mary. I wanna be a cowboy, I'd leave Mary to her pies. I'd learn to shoot at old tin cans, I'd win the rodeo prize. My lasso would be the fastest, I'd catch them roving steers. The girls would all admire me, I'd hear the grown men cheer. You can't be no cowboy, you have to be a squaw. If you wanna play this game with us, abide by the schoolyard law. Saloon dancer or be a horse, that's what girls should be. No, you can't cannot be eased. I wanna be a cowboy out there on my own. Just me and Pepito, my buddy. The wilds would be our home. We'd ride away from people, no one to make us sad, by telling me that we can dream about things we'll never have. Stop this cowboy talk of yours and be like other girls. Put on a dress and play with dolls, wear your hair in curls. Pa gets real mad at me, hates my boyish ways, says he'll love me once again when I'm through my cowboy phase. I wanna be a cowboy, but it's proving mighty hard. Me and Pepito are getting lonesome in the yard. So I will be a princess, that's what I gotta be. I'll squeeze this cowboy out of me and set Pepito free. Mary, Mary, dry them eyes, someday you'll see. The world is full of cowgirls roaming happily.
Musical talk.
Hello, my name's Tanya Holt and I have a show at the Edinburgh Fringe called Cautionary Tales for Daughters.
Thank you very much for agreeing to talk to Musical Talk. Now, your show is fantastic. I was going to call it a one-woman show, although that you also have a friend on piano and clarinet.
I do, yes.
But you are the focus of the show.
I am, yes.
And you wrote it.
I wrote it, yes.
And would you care to explain briefly what it is?
Yes.
I will give the adjectives, which are brilliant, sparkling, funny, and
Thank
just
you.
enough edge and sand in that oyster to make a pearl. But what's the conceit of the piece?
Well, I'm a singer and I'm also a composer, and I'm mother to a 9-year-old daughter, and I started to consider the idea of creating a piece of music that would warn her about certain things that she should expect as she got older. And that was the seeds of the idea of the Cautionary Tales for Daughters. And I've worked with, although it is a one-woman show, I actually have a fantastic collaborative team around me. So it's animation and song.
It is indeed.
Yes. And all of the cautionary tales, which I must warn you are grisly. This show is not suitable for children. We're advising 16 plus, but actually children of about 14 might be able to get something out of it. So all of the songs are animated or have some kind of visual backdrop. It's funny. It's dark.
It is that.
It is dark, and it contains one or two moments of a serious nature. So the themes are darkly serious, but the way I present them, I hope, is in an engaging and funny way.
Well, it's exactly that I'd quite like to talk to you about, if I may, because what I like is the fact that in the old-fashioned sense, there is a clear speech marks moral or point to
Yes.
each of the songs, but you have... on some, you picked a different way of dealing with each song, which is one of the reasons the show is so successful. It has an interesting profile, and it keeps changing with every song in the way that each issue is addressed. Sometimes it's fairly full-on, a simple cautionary tale, as we would expect from Hilaire Belloc.
Yes,
that
exactly,
kind of thing.
yes.
Chanel, the girl who's obsessed by labels, is a good kind of, here's what you're going to get, it does what it does, it's got a fantastic ending, and you play it perfectly. And then sometimes there's a piece where you have decided to take when I say a bleep, I mean a sideways way in onto the piece. There's a very serious piece about domestic violence.
Correct, yes.
And that is, in fact, the darkest moment of the whole show, I would say. But the song is a rather clever, illusory piece about red flags on a beach and not swimming because you know it's unsafe, but also, and the parallel that we as the audience draw is, of course, that actually when you see the red flags, the signs, when you see the red mist in a relationship where there is domestic violence, that is the time to withdraw. Don't go in, but get out.
But sadly, all too often people don't withdraw from those situations, and that was why I wanted to write a song about it. And I don't want to be seen to be somebody who preaches or knows best. God, I've made loads of mistakes in my own life, and I'm doing the best I can for my 9-year-old to try and prepare her in a way that doesn't scare her, but that she's also aware of the pitfalls of being a human being.
Well, you rather splendidly set that up right at the beginning.
Yes.
It's almost learn from my mistakes. Don't
Yes.
repeat my mistakes. I hope that you haven't gone through all the gamut of bits and pieces.
I don't think I dare.
No, quite. That
I
would be
don't
quite
think
a
there's
full
enough
life.
time in the day for a musical that long.
But I really do like the imagination that goes into each of the stories and how best to portray that in a way that isn't always overtly the obvious way. But let's start at the beginning. When did this show sort of come into your mind? When did you think? I mean, you said in your home life you were obviously thinking about these things, and that's a great creative path for many people. People like Anthony Newley wrote, I have to say, a tremendously maudlin song about when you are the father of daughters. But it shows that kind of concern and worry for young people, but particularly girls, in growing up.
Yes.
And so there are sort of other musical parallels. But I'm very interested to know when the gestation period and how it came to be here for Edinburgh.
Well, I had the idea about 2 years ago, and I started to put some of my ideas down, and that means writing them and recording them. And then I started to discuss it with the other mothers at Dottie's school, and they all said, yeah, we think that's a great idea. And then they started to contribute stories. So I then applied to the Arts Council of England and asked them if they might support me in creating the piece. And to my astonishment, they actually were very generous in their support.
And well done you on that.
Thank you. And I was able to organise groups of men and women, it's not all come from women, to do workshops so that we could ascertain what we felt would be great themes for the 21st century. And once I'd drawn on all that research, then I started to assemble the show.
Now, we've got to talk about Hilaire Belloc, because, he is the father of the cautionary tales sort of concept.
Indeed,
almost.
he is, yes.
And his name is still, there are many people who've not really heard of him, but that name will ring a bell. And because he very famously wrote a series of cautionary tales.
He did. He was most famous for that. In fact, he wrote a lot of poetry, which hasn't seen the light of day, but
No.
his cautionary tales are still told to children today. And he was writing at the end of the 19th and early 20th century. And he was a sort of I'd say, I'm a great fan of Roald Dahl, but he was a sort of predecessor to Roald Dahl.
He's a prototype, isn't
Yeah,
he,
and
in some senses?
Roald Dahl never had any fear of depicting adults as really nasty people. He told, which I think is why children like those books so much. And Hilaire Belloc was actually quite similar as well. So, he was definitely the inspiration originally, and now I've done lots of research. I've got lots of different avenues of inspiration.
Well, funny enough, I'd like to say it's a British tradition. I don't know if it is strictly British, but you can trace it all the way back to Lewis Carroll, that concept of adults in a maelstrom of a world which you're struggling to understand.
Yes.
It is, it's the Queen of Hearts who's the bad one, isn't it?
Yes.
She is the ultimate authority figure, not just because she's Queen, but because of her personality, which is so broad and encompassing. To be part of that tradition is quite interesting, I think. It's a golden thread through British culture.
Yes.
And you are very much tapping into that.
Well, I hope so, and I hope that these themes and these songs speak to a very wide group of people. I actually had a group of teenaged schoolgirls in, and I was quite surprised to see them because it's a brand new show, so I'm still learning now who my audience actually are, and I was absolutely amazed by how much they got out of it. They were incredibly keen. They laughed in all the right places.
Good.
They wanted to chat after the show, and it never occurred to me that a 16-year-old might get so much out of it. And I, as you mentioned earlier, I did a song about Chanel the labelled girl who's basically obsessed with Louis Vuitton, Nike, all those labels, and ends up in prison because of it. And they all love that one.
Really?
Yes, and I think it's just giving them the opportunity to laugh at how silly it is, rather than being in the pressurised school arena where you're expected to enjoy those things and put value on them.
Well, the great thing about theatre when it works well is it does take you out of society to allow you to look upon it. You know, which is basically the basis of satire, isn't it, in a way? And your show is very satirical.
It is very satirical,
So,
yes.
Also, that song is, I suspect, easy to understand because it's, as we said earlier, it's beautifully done, but in the simple way of here is the story. I'm telling you the
Yes,
story. The story
it's
is
a
beautifully told. The
completely
end.
straightforward cautionary tale, yes. There's nothing underlying about that one. But then I do one about Princess Sylvia, which is actually my favourite one to sing. And
she's the one in the ivory tower.
She's in the ivory tower, and she starts out as a 4-year-old girl in school, being very sort of pretty and clever and having all those things that, you know, might be useful in life. And she basically just gets inured to all the praise and love that she's receiving. But her main problem is that she can't make up her mind. And although ultimately she wants to have a family and settle down, and she has so many offers of that, she is just always waiting for one more to come along until eventually she's 80 and she's still in her ivory tower. And I depict her as a beauty queen wearing a sash and a rather unpleasant crown from from Frozen.
And once again, do you know the saga of Jenny?
I do, yes, Kurt
there's
Weill.
There's a touch of that as well.
There
isn't
is,
the woman
yes.
who would not make up her mind.
Yes.
So, but you are a very accomplished performer. It's interesting to me that this is a fresh show, you're finding out who your audience are, but you must have experience of songwriting and performing because you're immaculate from first to last.
That's very kind of you, thank you. Well, I love performing, I live for it. I started as an actress and then found my voice. And I've been a freelance cabaret singer for a very long time. I have an act with another lady, and that is the mainstay of my income. Is that?
Oh, right, okay. So you've got a core act.
I do.
And we know what that's called? So
It's
people
called Shoo Shoo Baby.
How are you spelling that?
Shoo Shoo Baby.
SHOO.
SHOO Baby. And we've been all over the world actually. We've been together for 15 years.
Right.
We take songs by Meatloaf, Verdi, Cole Porter.
When did they all work together?
They do, strangely. And we do new arrangements, close harmony arrangements. And it's funny and it's a bit camp, and we include the audience. And we're still going strong to this very day. We always think, oh, next year, that'll be our last year. And then,
Yes.
and then it goes on. Yeah.
But this show,
Yeah.
so it's premiered here in Edinburgh.
It has, yes. You've just seen its 7th show. Its
Really?
7th
I feel very honoured.
performance.
Well, it feels like it's... when I say dyed in the wool, I don't mean that in any kind of fusty sense. I mean in the sense of it's stable, it's secure, it's a confident show that seems to know what it's doing.
Well, I've spent a long time working on it, and I felt when I got here for the first performance that actually, despite thinking I didn't know the show, actually I've kind of completely absorbed it, and I'm loving it, and I'm finding every single day I'm finding some new thing to do within the show.
And you said that very interesting thing about not quite knowing who your audience is. Because
Yes.
the show is called Cautionary Tales for young...
For daughters, yes.
But it's also got a subtitle, isn't it?
Songs your mother never taught you.
And it has a very strong... And when I... it's very female-oriented, I think is the best way to describe it. I don't want to use any other term that might be misinterpreted.
It is, yes.
It is aimed... It's you and your accompanist are women.
Yes.
The songs are aimed at daughters, imaginary or otherwise.
Yes.
But it's entirely accessible for gentlemen. I fancy myself as a gentleman. And it's not judgmental or horrible. It addresses the reality of life, and some of those things are part of it. And once again, I don't want to get too poncy here, but it does address some of the iniquities of the patriarchal system. I don't think we can avoid that. That's
Yes.
the one we live in.
Yes.
And I say these things without any judgment. That is just where we are. But who did you think you were going to get? Because it's interesting that you didn't think you were going to get the daughters, and then you got the 16-year-olds. Because the audience today was of mixed age, and certainly an equal split between gender, with a slight tendency towards middle age, I would have said.
Yes.
I count myself very firmly in that camp, by the way.
I've been very surprised by how many men have turned up to the show. Younger men, actually, who've got...
Yes, there was one sitting next to me.
Yeah, who've seemed to get lots out of it and are laughing in all the right places. So that's been quite a surprise to me, actually. But I think with the Edinburgh Fringe, any show at 10 o'clock in the morning is going to attract a slightly older audience.
Yes.
Because those party animals who are in their 20s
Are asleep.
are still asleep from the night before.
Hungover,
So, it's still finding its audience. But, fathers are just as concerned about their daughters as mothers are.
That's Anthony Newley. Yes.
Yes. And in the longer version, because we're hoping to tour a longer version, I brought the show to Edinburgh with the view to hopefully receiving tour bookings. There is actually a song written by my director about his daughter, and that makes it into the show. And there are a few other themes as well, obviously, that will be included.
So it does have an afterlife.
I would hope so. Edinburgh doesn't actually make any money, and my Barclay card is sizzling around the edges.
Yes, on the red side of the
It
account,
is,
I imagine.
it is,
So that is the
definitely.
curse of it. On the other hand, it's a very good launch pad.
Very much
It's
so.
also a good place to learn because it's an intense, every day for 30 days if you're doing the full run, and the audiences
yes.
will tell you what they think.
Yes.
There's much, not that it happened to you, but there's much more. People feel free to leave a show if they're not enjoying it.
Yes.
And that, whilst can be heartbreaking, is also a lesson.
Yes. Well, we had somebody leave today, but she was actually a friend of mine who had a gig to go to. But
Oh, yes, no.
we haven't
best
had anyone
possible
leave
reason.
yet. Yes. But I don't think there's anything particularly in the show. There are moments that make you feel uncomfortable, possibly as a man, but not enough to make you want to leave.
No, and that's fair. I mean, also, however, you make it plain that it isn't all men. It is a man here
Yes.
and a man there, rather
Yes.
than all men. Well, that maybe undersells it, but it's about the issue and not about the gender.
Yes.
Yes, and I think I felt perfectly happy being there, but you're quite right, there are moments, there is a little bit of grit in your oyster, but that
Yes.
is all the better for it, isn't it? Because it gives you a profile as the show goes up and down.
Yeah, I think-
you couldn't pitch it at the same level. That
No.
would become daft.
I think whenever you're putting together a show, you need to give the show an emotional narrative, and by that I mean that it's got to have peaks and troughs in it. Otherwise, you become unmoved by
Yes.
it. But also, I think the song that you're referring to is about particular incidents with men who have overstepped the mark.
Which is
this
a very polite way of putting it.
Yes, and this sort of things happen to every woman I've spoken to.
really?
Oh yeah, and I feel quite strongly that we need to tell our daughters that actually it's not really okay. If a man touches you inappropriately in the office, and it's not a joke, and you really do need to deal with it straight away, and so we can put an end to that culture.
Well, it's only by shedding a light in the darker corners of society that you can actually ever bring that kind of change anyway, and that's true for all things that need changing.
But educating our daughters to understand that it's not their fault and they shouldn't be embarrassed, and that they should deal with it and have the courage to do that is the first step to making it better.
But it's an interesting point you raise, because there's also that rather splendid Speech Marks legitimate folk song from
Yes.
the medieval period, which is
Yes.
in fact not. Don't wish to breach the gag, but it's a lovely satire on modern culture, of the modern culture of celebrity.
Yes.
And it's the story of three daughters, two who go off and do Speech Marks worthwhile jobs like being a baker or a seamstress, as you would expect in a folk song, and then the third one who basically treads the darker path of celebrity, by which I mean the cheaper path, which is pushing it around a bit and getting in the papers and then appearing in Big Brother, and that, as you say,
Correct,
descent
yes.
from B to Z list celebrity status. But that is, of course, about the individual as well as the society. So you're warning not just about contextual problems, but about, I'm not going to say failures in oneself, but weaknesses and being led astray that people can allow themselves to do.
Yes.
Yeah, so it is about self-responsibility as well as
Collective.
each song
yes.
has a different point, and that's what I'm trying to say very badly, I think.
It does. Yes.
Let's talk about the staging. You really do integrate rather well with your projected, we're going to call them animations and illustrations,
Yes,
really.
yes.
And that's so much more than a standard Speech Marks one-person show.
Yes.
Was that always envisaged as being an important part of it?
No, it wasn't envisaged at all, actually. When I first started writing the piece, I literally imagined it would be one woman at a piano. And then I started to have these ideas that were rather grand, and now the show is fully accompanied by animation, and the animation is projected onto the model of a giant storybook.
It is like the beginning of a Disney film in that sense.
It's
isn't it?
absolutely
Yes.
beautiful. I can't claim any credit for it. I have a lady called Vesna Krebs from Slovenia who actually made that, and the projector, it's the screen as well. And she's very carefully and cleverly built in a projector inside the screen, so nobody really understands where it's coming from.
Yes, and who's your animator? Or is it a series of different ones?
It's a series of different ones, yes.
Well, they all bring something very different, and that actually helps, I think, bring that variety to your portfolio of songs, if I may say.
Well, I have, in an ideal world, and we're all allowed to dream in this profession, I imagine that I wouldn't be performing this show myself, and I'd have 5 women, and they would all take the individual characters portrayed in the show. So they would be standalone pieces with this animation, and that was kind of started to be my big idea. But, you might as well have big ideas, and if they don't work, at least you've tried.
But also, it allows, what it does, it shows the show can be versatile, beyond being a one-woman show or a two-woman show.
Definitely,
actually,
yeah.
If there was a group of people out there who thought, actually, we could do something with this in a slightly stagier way,
yes,
that would be possible. So, do you have a website or contact details?
Yes, of course. The website is cautionarytalesfordaughters.co.uk, and on that website you'll have the opportunity to look at some of the animations that we've been talking about, and there's also a page devoted to getting audiences pearls of wisdom and words of advice and caution, and some of those words of advice and caution we are actually including in our future songs. So if you feel like you've got some message to your younger self or to your daughter and you'd like to contribute it, please do go along to the website.
And just remind us, in Edinburgh you're here?
We are now here every day except Sunday tomorrow. From Monday we'll be at the Surgeons' Hall all the way to the 29th of August, so you've got 2 weeks to come and see this very educational and entertaining show.
And it's on at 10 o'clock in the morning, so the great thing is it doesn't clash with too many other things.
It's exactly, yes.
It's a lovely start to the day.
It is.
It's like a delicious glass of orange juice to me. It's got that sort of citrusy zest that you need first thing in the morning.
Thank you, I'm going to put that all over the posters. Come along, it's got citrusy zest to it, this show. No, do. It's an engaging show, and our audience reactions have been exceptional. We had one woman on the second day who stood up in front of the whole audience and announced that it was worth flying from America just to see that one show.
Really? Well done.
Oh, we've had some fantastic things said, but it's very hard when you're one of 3,200 shows
Indeed.
to get an audience. So if anyone's listening and would like to come along, we would be so happy if you did. Thank you.
And thank you so much for talking to Musical Talk, and I wish you great success with this show in Edinburgh and also beyond, because I think it's got legs.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Musical Talk. And that was Tanya Holt. It was an excellent show, and one of those shows that perhaps had a much wider attraction than the title at first might have suggested. And the great thing about her show was every song was utterly different. So the cowboy number you heard before the interview was both typical and atypical of the show. And the show certainly appealed to me. I gave it 5 stars, as you know, and I called it immaculate, funny, thoughtful, and full of zest. And sometimes, aside from marmalade, you really just don't get enough zest. And now on to 3 shows in 1. Listeners with long memories but tiny legs may remember that in 2009, I interviewed John Hinton about his new musical about the life of Charles Darwin. It was a one-man show, it was hilarious, and it was educational. It was also unlike anything I'd really seen before. And it wasn't just me who thought that. It went on to be a big success. And so a few years later, John came up with a second show in the same style, but this time about Albert Einstein, called Relatively Speaking, where he once again embodied the character of his central figure, in that case Albert Einstein, but not just illustrated parts of his life, but also his ideas. That's John's great secret. He is a great communicator as well as a great entertainer. And this year at the Edinburgh Fringe, he did something amazing. He brought up the third show of what he now calls his Science Trilogy, entitled The Element in the Room, a radioactive musical comedy about the death and life of Marie Curie. He played Marie Curie, by the way. And he did it in rotation, in repertory, if you like, with his other 2 shows. I, therefore, was lucky enough to see all 3 of his wonderful Science Trilogy shows. It was a remarkable feat of writing. It was a remarkable feat of performance. But most of all, it was just remarkable. They were great. I gave each one 5 stars and said of the overall Science Trilogy that it was a trio of 5-star masterpieces perfectly performed by the hilarious John Hinton, who brings not just 3 titans of science to life, but also their ideas, and all in the most engaging way possible. 3 wonderful shows which are truly full of wonder. Smashing. And I spoke no word of a lie when I said that. So let's hear now from the lovely John Hinton about his 3 shows, which it was my privilege to see at this year's Edinburgh Festival Fringe. Musical talk.
Hello, my name is John Hinton. I'm here at Edinburgh Fringe Festival where I'm doing 3 shows which are what we're calling our Science Trilogy of musical comedies about scientists. I'm doing a new show about Marie Curie called The Element in the Room, a radioactive musical comedy about the death and life of Marie Curie. Then we're also bringing back a show that I first did here 2 years ago called Albert Einstein, Relatively Speaking. And we're also doing a show that I first did here, 6 years ago, I believe it was, called The Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, or the Survival of Evolutionary Theories in the Face of Scientific and Ecclesiastical Objections, being a musical comedy about Charles Darwin, 1809 to 1882.
And I think, just for the purposes of this conversation, we're going to call them the Darwin Show.
The Darwin Show, the Einstein Show, yes, exactly, yeah. We'll do that.
I'm going to, because I've seen all 3.
Yes.
All 3 are fantastic. But what's interesting to me is that you are almost the embodiment in theatrical and musical theatrical terms of Lord Reith and his principles, because you do inform, you do educate, and you certainly do entertain.
Yes, right.
That's actually quite a difficult balance to find. These shows have real love in them. You embody the people who you're representing, but more importantly, you embody the ideas. The Marie Curie one, she actually says, stop talking about people and let's talk about ideas. So
yes.
Let's talk about the ideas.
Yes.
How did you come to think, how has this particular trilogy come to be, and what were you trying to get out of it?
It came to be because I wanted to write a solo show, and I'd always loved Charles Darwin, and The Origin of Species was one of my favourite books, and I thought I'd try to adapt that into theatre. And in the writing process, at some point during the writing process, that became a musical. It wasn't originally intended as a musical, it was intended as a solo show. It became a solo musical. And after, I took that to my good friend who's directing the shows, and he helped develop the script. And after that, you go around doing a show about Charles Darwin. People inevitably ask, who's the next scientist? And who would you like it to be, you say? And I actually did a bit of a survey in my networks of who people would like to see, and it was Einstein and Nikola Tesla came out on top. And so obviously Einstein has also always been a great fan. And then you just have to complete the trilogy, don't you? And for many, many reasons, it just had to be Marie Curie to complete it. Yeah, and they're all musical comedies. They all have similar things and very different things to them. What you said about the embodiment of whatever the
Reithian principles.
Exactly. I guess in all of them, I'm there as well. Yeah, John is on stage, embodying the character, and maybe that's what unites them all. And in the Curie piece, more than in the others, I do break out of character, and I'm very honest about the fact that it's me standing there in front of the audience. It goes more meta. Still, of course, wearing a dress, because that dress, it takes a little while to get into, in a beautiful dress that we've had made especially for the show, custom made. There was an original idea that I would actually get into the dress during the show, during the first song of the show. But yeah, when it was made in as a one-piece lovely dress,
it
was
look at the practical considerations.
Well, quite, yes.
But I really want to talk about the ideas behind it and the ideas you put through. There is this huge. I actually went today to see the Einstein Show. A friend of mine, he is a teacher, and he adored it. He adored it as a theatrical piece. He adored it as a comedy, and he adored it as a way of educating. He came out and said, "I have learned something." And then he said, "And that business about inert speeds, I think."
Yes, the inertial frame. Yes, that one.
You to say.
Yeah.
He said that's really useful for children to understand.
Right.
And so he was entranced by that. But actually, I think you do something much more clever than that, because I think you can educate adults, and adults are much harder to educate in some senses because they resist it, or they can do.
Yeah.
Particularly when they think they're out for a happy play.
Yeah.
You dabble with some truly interesting and complicated issues. In the Darwin one, of course, it's evolution. In the Einstein one, you do something amazing, which is both the special and the normal theories of relativity.
The general, yes. Yeah.
And then, of course, in the Marie Curie one, you do the alpha and the beta breakdowns of various forms of radioactivity.
Yes.
My word, these are concepts just to talk about, let alone illustrate.
Yes.
You have an educator in you somewhere, clearly.
Right, yeah.
How did
yeah.
you... But your theatrical history is physical.
Physical theatre, yes.
Exactly.
Jacques
Now,
Lecoq in Paris and all that. Yeah, absolutely.
There's
That's
no
what I
reason
studied.
to suggest a non-exclusive, of course not, because you're a highly intelligent man, but actually being able to harness one to get the other across is a huge achievement and a masterful achievement. I ask you, I make the statement. The question now is, how difficult was it for you?
I get excited about the ideas, and I want to transmit that to other people. If I find an idea that I don't understand, then I make sure I understand it fully, and then I get so excited in doing that's what I store up, and that's what I transmit.
Transmit is an interesting term as well.
Well, yes, I guess, because there are several ways of doing it. You know, you're doing it by explaining. You're doing it through analogies. You're doing it through song, through interaction. Yeah, you're not just lecturing.
No.
You know, you're transmitting in many forms. So how difficult was it for me? I think it's something I've probably got better at through doing it as well.
Certainly, there's each show in succession has been more. The ideas you're getting across are more difficult, more challenging. It seems.
Yes, and I mean we've had a lot of help with that from actual real scientists as well. Of course, at the University of Sussex, we now have them fact check the Darwin show, which was the first one. We didn't really do that in the same way. I wrote a play. That's someone sneezing, by the way. I wrote the play, being fascinated in the science, but actually made some mistakes, and people would come and see the show and be like, "Oh, no, it's very good, but you do know that barnacles are crustaceans and not mollusks," for example. So someone said at the Edinburgh Fringe 6 years ago. It's like, okay, cool. I'll just make a little note of that. Goes straight into the show. So it was sort of peer reviewed as it went along, shall we say? Crowd peer reviewed, right. So we decided to get that really properly right for the next ones. Yeah, I think that's really important that we do get them absolutely right, and that you know, I'm still fascinated by it. Doing the Einstein show today, that was the first time I've done that version of the show since February or March, and I mean I know I've gone through the lines yesterday, but transmitting it again to an audience live today, I got really excited about the ideas again. I was thinking for real about, oh my God, traveling near the speed of light. What can that feel like? Which is what Einstein did when he first came up with these crazy concepts. You know.
What was lovely though is your enthusiasm is intoxicating and catching, because actually. No, forgive me, this is actually the definition of charisma. You are able to go onto that stage and fill the room with your enthusiasm.
Sure. Yeah, great, thanks. That's good. Yeah, anything to get people interested in the science and give them a good time of anything.
But I don't want to underestimate your acting ability, which is so closely aligned with your physicality. You've got great physicality, great presence in terms of how you move and react and respond. But with Darwin, you've got this sort of, you play him as an internally enthusiastic character. There's an exuberance and almost a sort of a bumbling accidental proneness to Einstein.
Right.
But your Marie Curie is very self-contained. She's a very different character.
Yeah.
So you've delineated the three characters very thoroughly. And you are doing these three shows, at least at the moment, now in cycle.
Yes.
I'm not going to say one bleeds into the other, but it's an impressive feat for me as an audience member to see you so thoroughly embody, I must say, the John Hinton interpretation of these three characters, but those interpretations are very different.
Right. Yes. Absolutely. I think increasingly through the trilogy, I've delineated them more strongly. I've tried to do a closer interpretation of the real person. I think that my Darwin is bubbly and enthusiastic, which, according to what we read about him, Charles Darwin wasn't.
It's an interpretation.
Yes, absolutely. Einstein, we have our
Yeah,
exactly. Which I draw from. Yes, I draw from his cultural image, as it were. Curie, less well known. Well, I mean, we've heard of her, but it's far less well known what she was like as a person.
And she's often sort of coupled with Louis Pasteur, if she is remembered.
Right.
It's very unfair, of course.
Right, of course. And she was a shy person and an internal person. She shunned publicity and shunned journalists, and in a way, doing justice to that character is a little tricky in theatre, and that's one of the reasons why that show has all the other characters in as well. That's the one where it's John at the base, it's her, and then it's several other characters. And the character of Missy, who's one of the main characters in the show, who comes to find her at the beginning, is maybe the Darwin in that show, or the Einstein in that show, the bubbly, effusive one.
Well, these other characters are the electrons that circle the
right. Oh, very good. Yes, of course that's deliberate. Yeah.
But it's true, isn't it? And that's what I loved actually about the Marie Curie one. And it's lovely to see the three of them in together, one after the other, because it is interesting how she is so single-minded, really. But there's another wonderful aspect of the script writing, which of course you're also responsible for,
right?
Which is, particularly in the Einstein and the Marie Curie one, which is the moral issues which come out of scientific discoveries. It's not quite so profound in the Darwin one, I think. But in the Einstein one, and very differently, in both of them, it's very strong, and of course it is a real problem. Or an issue that has to be faced. The ethical nature of scientific discovery.
Yes.
You can use, it's the old story, you can use a knife for good or you can use a knife for bad. But what they discovered and what they were responsible for are so important and amazing. You ask, those questions are not just addressed intellectually, also it is where the heart of the emotion almost is in some of the pieces. Yes,
good, lovely. I think that's something that we've got better and better at, again, through the trilogy. We've dared to go there, dared to step closer to that uncomfortable territory of the bad things that science can be used for. Pierre Curie, Marie's husband, in his Nobel Prize acceptance speech, said something along the lines of, radioactivity could be very dangerous in the hands of criminals, but I, like Nobel, believe that it's basically that it's good to do it anyway. Let's do it anyway because it'll serve more good than bad in the end.
That's actually a philosophical position that probably most people would accept anyway if they thought about it. Just getting people to think about it is the issue.
Yep.
And I really love the fact that, as you say, there's a little bit of grit in the oyster, which actually is the lovely thing you take away with the show afterwards. You've had a fantastic time. It's very funny. You're such a good performer and so enjoyable on stage. Enjoyment is the overriding tone. But there's the thing that lingers in the mind an hour, a day, a week after seeing the show. Right,
is that grit. Right, yes, absolutely. I think you having seen the Darwin show 6 years ago and
now,
just yesterday, I don't know if you noticed, but the final song has been replaced since 6 years ago. It called The Descent of Man. It's still called The Descent of Man, but it's a completely different song, a new song we do now. And that's my attempt to go, okay, I've managed to delve deeper in these new shows. I want to delve deeper in the older show as well. I want to say, why do I want to do a show about Darwin? Well, because I think it's really important that we understand that we came from apes, basically, or that we have a common predecessor with apes. So let's really tackle that in this song and say, no, it's
more
not
forthright, which in itself shouldn't be, but is controversial.
Yeah.
But and therefore has to be faced on. It doesn't pull punches, which is not in a vicious way, but it stands its ground.
Yeah. Oh, good.
Right.
Yes.
That's the way to put it. I think. Yes, it has a. I say punch is not the right answer, but it has a strength, a fortitude.
Yes, and it's a sing along as well. It's an opportunity to get the audience agreeing with me, with Darwin about evolution, basically.
But let's not underestimate your versatility in terms of song, both in songwriting and song performance, because whilst they don't fit the model of a traditional musical, they are all the way through sort of illuminated, and that's possibly a good term, with surprisingly catchy songs, certainly genuinely funny songs for the most part, which also make a point, and definitely entertain, but sometimes you're accompanied, sometimes you play yourself on the guitar. You know, there's a raft of different things going on, but in a way, I think they sort of ease the show along a little bit. It's as you say, they're not lectures. Even the Einstein one, where he is purporting to give a lecture, is in no way a lecture.
Right, yeah, absolutely. Again, the music is something that I feel the trajectory has gone in the right direction the whole way through. I play the guitar, but I'm not a proficient guitar player. But since nor was Charles Darwin, nor was he left-handed. So that one, because it was a solo show, it was me on guitar. For the second show, my then partner Jo, who is now my wife, joined the team and helped me compose those songs, with her being very proficient pianist.
I was going to say she's very accomplished on the accordion.
Well, indeed, exactly. And then really her instrument is the accordion, if anything. So with the third show, because it was Curie, it was, set in France, starts in France anyway, accordion was then a very obvious instrument to play. To have involved, yes, and seeking to do new things with the music as well, to use it in different ways. In Curie, more than the others, we're using it to underscore occasionally, to provide sound effects. Jo's in this one present the entire way through on stage, whereas in Einstein she's on and off.
And in Darwin, she's the postman.
Or she's there for a minute. Yes, exactly. Yeah, chucks a letter at my face. Yeah.
I like that. As you say, the underscoring as well. I think the word is a soundscape, isn't it? Really, you're actually. It's world creation, which is actually what theatre is, of course.
Yes.
You describe it as a one-man show, but I think, and of course it is. And yet, at the same time, it's populated by a wealth of characters. And those characters come alive. And because they come alive, it isn't a one-man show. Or a one-woman show, right. Marie Curie's.
Sure. Yeah, great. I mean, the Darwin show has about 15 characters, I want to say. I think it's something like that. But it's Darwin who plays them.
Yes,
he's at the base. I mean, I'm underneath him, I guess. He's the base of the show. He takes on the character of his father, of Captain Fitzroy, of lots of other characters through his wife. Einstein show, because we wanted to make it very different. Einstein is Einstein. He doesn't take on other characters, and it's Jo who then plays several characters, who comes in as several characters. Who are the women in his life, shall we say. And then after that, I guess the Curie show is a fusion of those ideas. It's multiple characters. It's me who plays the multiple characters, but with John as the base, and those characters sitting on top of John. We refer. I mean, it's me. It sounds highly pompous of me to talk about myself in the third person like that, but that's how we refer to it when I'm working with my director.
And when you're on stage, you are a character.
Yes, even the base me is a character. Absolutely. Yeah.
I understand base in this sense as foundation rather than
basil.
Yes. Now, I'm privileged. I've seen all three shows.
You're one of very few who has.
But that's only because Marie Curie is so fresh.
Yes, that's true. Exactly. Yes.
And they make a beautiful trilogy. They really do. And the great thing is, you can actually. I think you can watch them in any order, because I certainly haven't watched them in chronological order in any way, either in terms of creation or in terms of lifespans of the central characters.
Yep.
So I think it's one of those things that you can see either one of or all three of, and it works in every way you cut this cake. It is a delicious cake. At the end of the day, how have people been responding to them? I mean, Darwin is a surefire hit because you're just so on fire almost, and the exuberance through Einstein is entirely appealing.
Yes.
Marie Curie is a slightly different kettle of fish, but if I may say, it's a slightly more sophisticated piece as well. That sense of development. So.
It'll be very interesting to see how the Curie show plays on tour. It's got a tour lined up for the next year now, that show. And, I've been touring the Darwin and Einstein ones pretty continually for the last several years. And it will be a different thing with Curie. I mean, it's going to be incredibly exciting to take it to all these places. I absolutely love playing village halls, small community centres. really excited about taking this new one to those audiences as well. Who's to know? I mean, it's been going down amazingly here. The Darwin and Einstein ones are proving pretty big hits here, partly because they're doing they're doing 5 performances each, also because they have a track record here at Fringe. And the Curie audiences are building very steadily as well. So,
and you've had some good stars, I think.
We have had some good stars, yes. The only publication that publishes stars that has been to see us so far is Broadway Baby. We got 5 from them.
Yeah, and deservedly.
Thank you. We've got a highly recommended from Fringe Review as well, and some lovely blog reviews as well.
So people can see you at the Fringe with all 3 shows. How can they do that?
I'm at 3:30 in the afternoon at Pleasance 2, which is at Pleasance Courtyard on Pleasance.
Those are all there, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Repeat the Pleasances and you'll get there eventually. They're in rep now. So I'm doing. So as we sit here on a Sunday, I'm doing Curie tomorrow on a Monday. And then they cycle through, and we have Tuesdays off.
Very good, yes. Well, it also makes the week work, doesn't it? Because it's 6 days plus 1. So.
Yes, quite. Yes, that's Tuesday's my weekend.
But you, as a company, you're Tangram.
Yes, that's right.
And so give people your, if I may, website and contact details, because there will be people who want to know how they can see this show and all your other shows as they are put on tour, etc.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
Contact you, I think.
Yes, very good. We are tangramtheatre.co.uk. And we're on both Facebook and Twitter as Tangram Theatre, one word. And hashtag Cyan Trilogy as well is a good one. And I'm Johnny_Acecraft on Twitter as well. And I'm John Hinton.
You are a man of many names and many talents.
Well, thank you. Long show titles as well.
But also, there's such a playfulness in your words.
Oh, yes. I do love a good word every so often, yeah, absolutely.
Well, I just would like to hear you name the Einstein show title, because I know none of the ticket officers can say it.
Albert Einstein, relatively speaking.
Yes.
There is a lot of people on tour who get that just slightly wrong, or in strange ways, actually, unusual ways they get it wrong. But yeah, that's the one. Thank you.
Well, thank you, John.
Thank you, Thos.
I mean, I've loved your show since I first sort of came across them 6 years ago. I'm delighted there's a trilogy. I suspect the last question is going to have to be the question everyone will now ask you. Is there going to be a 4th, or are you going to disappear into other directions, other great men and women of history in other ways?
I'm still really fascinated by science. So there is loads more to explore there. As for solo / duo shows about scientists, the trilogy is a unit, I think, and it probably very unlikely in the next decade or so to be trilogy +1, +2, etc. But it'll certainly be theatre, it'll certainly have music in it, it'll certainly be funny, and it'll most likely be about science for a little while to come at least.
Thank you. Well, I think of you very much as the James Burke of musical theatre. That is one of the highest compliments I can pay you, because that is a man who has both history at his fingertips and science understanding, and the skill to entertainingly make people understand the concepts. You do exactly the same thing, and if that doesn't get you the equivalent of a Nobel Prize for theatre, I'll share a BAFTA with you if you like.
Oh, right, fine, yeah. We'll be up there on the podium together, no problem.
No, John, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
I wish you great success for the future.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much.
Musical talk. And there we are, John Hinton there, a remarkable performer. For the record, I gave each of those shows 5 stars individually, as well as 5 stars collectively. And in the case of the Darwin show, I said it was a tour de force for John Hinton, who amuses and amazes throughout. A perfect, clever gem. For his wonderful Einstein show, I said hilarious from start to finish, informative, educational, and most of all, utterly entertaining. And for his brand new Marie Curie piece, I refer to it as an intelligent, funny and ultimately thought-provoking delight. And there you have it. 5 shows, 3 performers, 25 stars. As they say in America, you do the math. Although I don't think that's a tremendously useful thing to do really, because it would just give you a total of 33. And 33 doesn't stand for very much in particular, although if you were a record, it would be revolutionary. Ha ha, a joke. And a weak one at that, I'm sure you'll agree. And talking of weeks, the next episode of Musical Talk is in one. A week, that is. So, why not join us again for more chat about musical theatre? And if it sounds like I'm sort of gearing up to end this episode, you're absolutely right. I am. But as I can't think of a good gear or indeed clutch gag, I think I might just get straight on with the saying goodbye part. Goodbye part? Literal, literal, literal. This episode of Musical Talk edited and presented by Thos Ribbits. Copyright Musical Talk 2015, except for the songs where the copyright remains with the original creators, and my thanks to them for allowing me to play their work on this programme. Don't forget to follow Musical Talk on all the social networks, and follow me on Twitter, should you wish to, at Musical Talk Thos.
And Hilaire Belloc